Hey friends, welcome back to the Sinai to Zion study. We're now in session 28. And as I said at the end of last session, we're going to now look at David's great processional psalm. We're going to look at Psalm 68. And as I said as we're ending, this is one of my absolute most favorite of all of the psalms. I'm absolutely in love with this. Now, in the same way, as I mentioned in a previous session, that Deuteronomy 33, it's written in very ancient Akkadian Hebrew. Likewise, Psalm 68 is very ancient Hebrew, and it's very difficult. It is universally, among scholars, recognized to be the most difficult of all the Psalms to understand, to translate, and to interpret. Okay, so it's a very challenging passage because they look at it and they can't quite figure out what it's talking about. They go, is this talking about King David in the past? Is it talking about the Exodus? Is it talking about the return of Jesus? And they go, it seems to be like a little bit of all of the above, even to the point where they say, and this is funny, the more liberal scholars, they think it's a few different psalms that sort of got cut up and jumbled together. And the reality is that's not the case at all. This is a psalm that was arguably written by King David. And in order to understand it properly, it's actually pretty simple, or I mean, it's much more simple than we often think. Okay, now, when Israel was in the desert of the Exodus, being led by Moses, and the Lord commanded them to build the Ark of the Covenant, through Torah, he gave them the very specific directions out of acacia wood, which are the trees all the way down there in Saudi Arabia. You see them everywhere in the desert. And the ark was designed to have these rings on the side that you could put these poles through, and then the priests would pick it up, and it was intended to be carried. Just like oftentimes these palanquins, or you could say even thrones in ancient times. They were intended to be picked up and carried, almost like chariots. In fact, many thrones also had wheels in ancient times. Later they had wheels, and they may have either been carried by servants or they had wheels, or a combination of both, which is, by the way, how the throne of God itself is described. It's a throne, it has wheels. It's the throne of a king. It's the throne of a warrior king. Okay, but that's sort of a side issue. So whenever the cloud lifted, when Israel was in the desert and the cloud lifted and went forward, moved forward, Israel knew they were to follow the Lord, follow his lead, because the Lord was in the cloud. In fact, the Bible actually calls the cloud the angel of the Lord. It says, obey him. So the Lord's manifest presence was in the cloud, the pillar of cloud by day or smoke by day, and fire at night. But whenever they lifted the ark, Moses would make this statement. You can see it in Numbers 10, verse 35. Arise, O Lord, or rise up, O Lord. And then he would say, let your enemies be scattered, and let those who hate you flee before you. So the idea was, on one hand, the cloud represents the presence of God. On the other hand, the ark itself represents the presence of God. And as long as Israel was following the Lord, they would defeat their enemies. But Moses would make this prophetic declaration, arise, O Lord, let your enemies be scattered, and let those who hate you flee from before you. Now, years later, when Israel was in the land, and in fact David was king, we read of the story of when David actually moved the Ark of the Covenant. So the story of the Ark of the Covenant, when it enters Israel, it's in a few different places. It doesn't immediately end up in Jerusalem. It's at Shiloh, it's here, there. But in 2 Samuel chapter 6, it's in the house of Obed-Edom for a while, which, by the way, is just a few miles from Jerusalem. So it's just outside of Jerusalem. But they left it there for a while because previously, when they went to move it, a couple of the priests, the oxen tipped and they touched it and they died. And they were just like, man, this thing is fire. Let's just leave it in the house of Obed-Edom for a while because we don't want anyone else getting killed. We want to obey the Lord, this type of thing. Well, at a certain point, David says, no. It needs to be where it belongs. It needs to be on the holy hill. It needs to be in Jerusalem. And so the story of David moving the ark, it's a really beautiful story. We see it in 2 Samuel 6 as well as 1 Chronicles chapter 15. And when this happens, I'm going to read from, I think it's actually the same in both 2 Samuel 6 verse 5 and 1 Chronicles. David and all the house of Israel were celebrating before the Lord with all kinds of instruments made of fir wood, lyres, harps, tambourines, castanets, and cymbals. So there was a big worship celebration as they carried the ark, because again, the ark represents what? The presence of God going up to his home in Jerusalem.
We hope you're enjoying this Maranatha Global Bible Study. Wanted to take a quick minute here and ask you to consider something. Our highest priority as an organization is laying foundations where there are none in the 1040 window, in accordance with Romans 15, to name the name where it's never been named. Now, if this is something that resonates with you, if you love the Maranatha message, proclaiming it to the ends of the earth at the end of the age, if this is something that resonates with you, I want to ask you to consider becoming a $5 monthly supporter of FAI. This is, as crazy as it sounds, one of the most relevant and significant ways that you can support the work of the Great Commission through the FAI Global family is by giving $5 a month. Because as the collective body of $5 givers a month grows, so too does our ability to increase our workforce on the ground and expand our initiatives and activities and operations in the Middle East in the 1040 window. So click on the link below for more information and consider starting today becoming a $5 monthly supporter of FAI. Thank you guys. Back to the teaching.
And in 2 Samuel 6, verse 14, I love this. Daniel led the way, and he danced before the ark, it says, with all of his might. Like with complete abandon. And he actually strips down. He's kind of in his like undergarments. And this is the episode where his wife, Michal, is looking out the window, and she's like upset. She's like, oh, how the king has dignified himself in the presence of Israel today. Like, you look so undignified, because he didn't care. He was just there to worship the Lord, and he danced wildly before the ark. And there was this procession with all of the instruments and all of the worshiping and celebration as they celebrated. Now, here's the thing. When David picked up the ark, following after the pattern of Moses, what did he say? Arise, O Lord. Let your enemies be scattered. Let those who hate you flee before you. So this is the beginning of Psalm 68. Psalm 68 quotes, as we just saw, Numbers chapter 10. David is quoting Moses. So we understand the Old Testament reason for this declaration. But here's the thing. It also today serves as a cry, as an intercessory prayer. It's not just a historical reference. It's saying, Lord, you who presently are seated at the right hand of the Father on the throne, arise, O Lord. Come down and put an end to your enemies. Arise, O Lord. Let your enemies be scattered. The beginning of Psalm 68 is, please hear me, it is essentially the Maranatha cry of the Old Testament. Arise, O Lord. Come, Lord Jesus. Maranatha, come Lord Jesus, arise, O Lord. It's the same thing. And so Psalm 68, it has these historical references, yes, but again, it ultimately points toward the return of the Lord. It begins with this intercessory cry. Now let me just say this, it's kind of cute. I was raised nominally Catholic, and so I'm very familiar with a lot of the chants in the Catholic Church and this type of thing. And I don't hate them. I actually have a certain affinity, appreciation for some of it. But if I'm to be honest with you, a lot of the Catholic chant, it sounds to me like it feels very effeminate to me. And for that reason, I kind of don't like it. You know, like, in the unity of the Holy Spirit, you know. But what I do love, for what it's worth, I'm a Protestant, dyed-in-the-wool Protestant, son of the Reformation, but I do appreciate, from a distance, some of the chants and different things of the Eastern Orthodox, the Russians and the Greeks. They're not effeminate at all. Like, they all have these big black beards and black tunics and so forth, and just these deep-throated Russians, and they love chanting Psalm 68. And so you'll hear it, like if you get any, I just get it on, you know, Spotify or Apple Music or something. I'll sometimes listen, when I'm driving long distance, I'll listen to some of these Orthodox chants. And it's, arise, O Lord, let your enemies be scattered. You know, it's just so, as wax melts before the fire, so let them, you know, perish. And it's just so robust. And and powerful. So I've always kind of loved it, even before I really understood the prophetic relevance of Psalm 68. Now, further, it was likely celebrated because it was such a powerful, momentous event in Israel's history. It was also probably, scholars speculate, that it was actually sung. Psalm 68 was sung and celebrated every year when the pilgrimage, when people came from all over up to Jerusalem to celebrate Sukkot. Now, what does Sukkot speak of within the biblical holy days? Sukkot speaks of when God dwells amongst us. So Israel was commanded to build these huts. They're called sukkah in the Hebrew. They're these sort of little buildings that they would put together, and they were to sleep outside in the sukkah and eat outside to remind them, and this is beautiful, that we don't have a permanent home here. We are strangers and aliens, and they were supposed to be able to look up through the ceiling and see the stars, to remind themselves that this world, this age, is not our permanent home, but rather God himself will dwell with us. And so when they went up to Jerusalem to celebrate Sukkot, the scholars speculate that they would have every year sort of done a reenactment of the great day when David brought the ark up to Jerusalem. They might have done it multiple times, and they would have sung Psalm 68. And they would have essentially been looking forward to the ultimate day when the king would return and deliver them. So it's rich with meaning. Now I'm just going to read verses 1 through 3, and in the next session we're really going to jump in and go much deeper. So arise, O Lord, let his enemies be scattered, let those who hate him flee before him. As smoke is blown away, driven away, so drive them away, like smoke, just like nothing. As wax melts before the fire, let the wicked perish before God. But let the righteous be glad. There's always this contrast. The wicked will perish. The righteous that have been waiting, that have been yearning, that have been crying, Maranatha, come Lord Jesus. Those that are groaning with all creation. The first fruits of the Spirit within us are groaning. As the righteous have been waiting, let them be glad. Let them exult before God. Yes, let them rejoice with gladness. And so this twofold statement, judgment for the wicked, salvation and relief for the righteous. This becomes common throughout Old Testament descriptions of the day of the Lord, of the coming of God. And we actually see it in the New Testament as well, when Jesus summarizes this statement by saying, and then he will give to each one according to his deeds. It's a summary of saying punishment, vengeance for the wicked, salvation, righteous, and rewards for salvation and rewards for the righteous. So it really lays the foundation for what we are to expect. So it's a beautiful psalm. We're going to kind of go through and look at some of the key components, and it's a big psalm, so obviously we can't get in great detail, but in the next session we're going to just begin to, we're going to jump through this a bit. So look forward to doing that with you all. Until then, God bless you all, and Maranatha.